Volume One, Chapter Fourth of the Antiquary. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Antiquary by Sir Walter Scott. Chapter Fourth. The pawky auld carle came ower the weed, wi' mony gudeins and good morrows to me, saying, Kind sir, for your courtesy, will ye lodge a silly poor man? The Gaberlunzie Man. Our two friends moved through a little orchard, where the aged apple trees, well loaded with fruit, showed, as is usual in the neighbourhood of monastic buildings, that the days of the monks had not always been spent in indolence, but often dedicated to horticulture and gardening. Mr. Oldbuck failed not to make a level remark, that the planters of those days were possessed of the modern secret of preventing the roots of the fruit trees from penetrating the till, and compelling them to spread in a lateral direction, by placing paving stones beneath the trees, when first planted, so as to interpose between their fibres and the subsoil. This old fellow, he said, which was blown down last summer, and still, though half reclined on the ground, is covered with fruit, has been, as you may see, accommodated with such a barrier between his roots and the unkindly till. That other tree has a story. The fruit is called the abbot's apple. The lady of a neighbouring baron was so fond of it, that she would often pay a visit to Monkbarns, to have the pleasure of gathering it from the tree. The husband, a jealous man belike, suspected that a taste so nearly resembling that of Mother Eve prognosticated a similar fall. As the honour of a noble family is concerned, I will say no more on the subject, only that the lands of Lochard and Cringlecut still pay a fine of 6 bowls of barley annually, to atone the guilt of their audacious owner, who intruded himself and his worldly suspicions upon the seclusion of the abbot and his penitent. Admire the little belfry rising above the ivy-mantled porch. There was here a hospitium, hospitala, or hospitamentum, for it is written all these various ways in the old writings and evidence, in which the monks received pilgrims. I know our minister has said, in the statistical account, that the hospitium was situated either in the lands of Haltweary or upon those of Half-starvet. But he is incorrect, Mr. Lovel. That is the gate called still the Palmer's Port, and my gardener found many hewn stones, when he was trenching the ground for winter celery, several of which I have sent as specimens to my learned friends, and to the various antiquarian societies of which I am an unworthy member. But I will say no more at present. I reserve something for another visit, and we have an object of real curiosity before us." While he was thus speaking, he led the way briskly through one or two rich pasture meadows, to an open heath or common, and so to the top of a gentle eminence. "Here," he said, "Mr. Lovel, is a truly remarkable spot." "It commands a fine view," said his companion, looking around him. "True, but it is not for the prospect I brought you hither. Do you see nothing else remarkable? Nothing on the surface of the ground?" "Why, yes, I do see something like a ditch, indistinctly marked." "Indistinctly! Pardon me, sir, but the indistinctness must be in your powers of vision. Nothing can be more plainly traced. A proper agger or vallum, with its corresponding ditch or fossa." "Indistinctly! Why, heaven help you, the lassie, my niece, as light-headed a goose as womankind affords, saw the traces of the ditch at once. Indistinct! Why, the great station at Ardoch, or that at Brunswark and Annandale, may be clearer, doubtless, because there are stative forts, whereas this was only an occasional encampment. Indistinct! Why, you must suppose that fools, boors, and idiots have ploughed up the land, and, like beasts and ignorant savages, have thereby obliterated 2 sides of the square, and greatly injured the third. But you see yourself the 4th side is quite entire." Lovel endeavoured to apologize, and to explain away his ill-timed phrase, and pleaded his inexperience. But he was not at once quite successful. His first expression had come too frankly and naturally not to alarm the Antiquary, and he could not easily get over the shock it had given him. "My dear sir," continued the senior, "your eyes are not inexperienced. You know a ditch from level ground, I presume, when you see them?" "Indistinct! Why, the very common people, the very least boy that can herd a cow, calls it the Came of Kinprunes; and if that does not imply an ancient camp, I am ignorant what does." Lovel having again acquiesced, and at length lulled to sleep the irritated and suspicious vanity of the Antiquary, he proceeded in his task of cicerone. "You must know," he said, "our Scottish antiquaries have been greatly divided about the local situation of the final conflict between Agricola and the Caledonians. Some contend for Ardoch in Strathallan, some for Innerpeffry, some for the Rhydikes in the Mearns, and some are for carrying the scene of action as far north as Blair and Atholl. Now, after all this discussion," continued the old gentleman, with one of his slyest and most complacent looks, "what would you think, Mr. Lovel, I say, what would you think, if the memorable scene of conflict should happen to be on the very spot called the Came of Kinprunes, the property of the obscure and humble individual who now speaks to you?" Then, having paused a little to suffer his guest to digest a communication so important, he resumed his disquisition in a higher tone. "Yes, my good friend, I am indeed greatly deceived if this place does not correspond with all the marks of that celebrated place of action. It was near to the Grampian Mountains. Lo! yonder they are, mixing and contending with the sky on the skirts of the horizon. It was in conspectu classis, in sight of the Roman fleet. And would any admiral, Roman or British, wish a fairer bay to ride in than that on your right hand? It is astonishing how blind we professed antiquaries sometimes are. Sir Robert Sibbald, Saunders Gordon, General Roy, Doctor Stokely, why, it escaped all of them. I was unwilling to say a word about it till I had secured the ground, for it belonged to old Johnny Howie, a bonnet laird, hard by, and many a communing we had before he and I could agree. Reader's note: a bonnet laird signifies a petty proprietor, wearing the dress, along with the habits, of a yeoman. End reader's note. At length, I am almost ashamed to say it, but I even brought my mind to give acre for acre of my good cornland for this barren spot. But then it was a national concern, and when the scene of so celebrated an event became my own, I was overpaid. Whose patriotism would not grow warmer, as old Johnson says, on the plains of Marathon? I began to trench the ground to see what might be discovered, and the third day, sir, we found a stone, which I transported to Monkbarns, in order to have the sculpture taken off with plaster of Paris. It bears a sacrificing vessel, and the letters ADLL, which may stand, without much violence, for Agricola decavit Libens Lubens. Certainly, sir, for the Dutch antiquaries claim Caligula as the founder of a lighthouse, on the sole authority of the letters CCPF, which they interpret Caius Caligula Farum Fecit. True, and it has ever been recorded as a sound exposition. I see we shall make something of you even before you wear spectacles, notwithstanding you thought the traces of this beautiful camp indistinct when you first observed them. In time, sir, and by good instruction, you will become more apt, I doubt it not. You shall peruse upon your next visit to Monkbarns my trivial essay upon castrametation, with some particular remarks upon the vestiges of ancient fortifications, lately discovered by the author at the Came of Kinprunes. I think I have pointed out the infallible touchstone of supposed antiquity. I premise a few general rules on that point, on the nature, namely, of the evidence to be received in such cases. Meanwhile, be pleased to observe, for example, that I could press into my service Claudian's famous line, Illa Claudinuis posuit qui castra pruinis. For pruinis, though interpreted to mean hoar-frost, to which I own we are somewhat subject in this north-eastern sea-coast, may also signify a locality, namely, prunes. The castra pruinis posita would therefore be the came of Kinprunes. But I waive this, for I am sensible it might be laid hold of by cavillers, as carrying down my castra to the time of Theodosius, sent by Valentinian into Britain as late as the year 367, or thereabout. No, my good friend, I appeal to people's eyesight. Is not here the Decumon gate? And there, but for the ravage of the horrid plough, as the learned friend calls it, would be the Praetorian gate. On the left hand you may see some slight vestiges of the Porta Sinistra, and on the right, one side of the Porta Dextra, well nigh entire. Here, then, let us take our stand on this tumulus, exhibiting the foundation of ruined buildings, the central point, the Praetorium, doubtless of the camp. From this place, now scarce to be distinguished but by its slight elevation and its greener turf from the rest of the fortification, we may suppose Agricola to have looked forth on the immense army of Caledonians occupying the declivities of yon opposite hill, the infantry rising rank over rank as the form of ground displayed their array to its utmost advantage, the cavalry and coenari, by which I understand the charioteers, another guise of folks from your Bond Street four-in-hand men, I trow, scouring the more level space below. See then, Lovel, see that huge battle moving from the mountains, their gilt coats shine like dragon scales, their march like a rough tumbling storm. See them, and view them, and then see Rome no more. Yes, my dear friend, from this stance it is probable, nay, it is nearly certain, that Julius Agricola beheld what our Beaumont has so admirably described, from this very Praetorium. A voice from behind interrupted his ecstatic description. Praetorian here, Praetorian there, I mind the bigging o't. Both at once turned round, Lovel with surprise, and Oldbuck with mingled surprise and indignation, at so uncivil an interruption. An auditor had stolen upon them, unseen and unheard, amid the energy of the Antiquary's enthusiastic declamation, and the attentive civility of Lovel. He had the exterior appearance of a mendicant, a slouched hat of huge dimensions, a long white beard which mingled with his grizzled hair, an aged but strongly marked and expressive countenance, hardened by climate and exposure to a right brick-dust complexion, a long blue gown, with a pewter badge on the right arm, two or three wallets or bags slung across his shoulder, for holding the different kinds of meal when he received his charity in kind from those who were but a degree richer than himself. All these marked at once a beggar by profession, and one of that privileged class which are called in Scotland the king's bedesmen, or vulgarly, blue gowns. "What is that you say, Edie?" said Oldbuck, hoping, perhaps, that his ears had betrayed their duty. "What were you speaking about?" "About this bit bourock, your honour," answered the undaunted Edie. "I mind the bigging o't." "The devil you do! Why, you old fool, it was here before you were born, and will be after you are hanged, man." "Hanged or drowned, here awa, dead or alive, I mind the bigging o't." You," said the Antiquary, stammering between confusion and anger, "you strolling old vagabond, what the devil do you know about it?" "Ou, I ken this about Monkbarns, and what profit have I for telling ye a lie? I just ken this about it, that about 20 years syne, I and a wheen Halland shakers like mysell, and the mason lads that built the lang dyke that gaes down the loaning, and twa or three herds maybe, just set to wark and built this bit thing here that ye ca' the Praetorian, and I just for a bield it auld Aikendrum's bridle, and a bit blithe gae down wi' hae didn't, some sair rainy weather. Mair by token, Monkbarns, if ye howk up the bourock, as ye seem to hae begun, ye'll find, if ye hae not fund it already, a stane that ane o' the mason callants cut a ladle on to have aboard at the bridegroom, and he put 4 letters on't, that's Aikendrum's lang ladle, for Aiken was ane o' the kale suppers of Fife." "This," thought Lovel to himself, "is a famous counterpart to the story of Keip on thy side." He then ventured to steal a glance at our Antiquary, but quickly withdrew it in sheer compassion; for, gentle reader, if thou hast ever beheld the visage of a damsel of 16, whose romance of true love has been blown up by an untimely discovery, or of a child of 10 years, whose castle of cards has been blown down by a malicious companion, I can safely aver to you that Jonathan Oldbuck of Monkbarns looked neither more wise nor less disconcerted. "There is some mistake about this," he said, abruptly turning away from the mendicant. "Deil a bit on my side o' the wa'," answered the sturdy beggar. "I never deal in mistakes, they aye bring mischances. Now, Monkbarns, that young gentleman that's with your honour thinks little of a carle like me, and yet I'll wager I'll tell him whare he was yestreen at the gloamin', only he maybe wadna like to hae spoken on't in company." Lovel's soul rushed to his cheeks, with the vivid blush of 22. "Never mind the old rogue," said Mr. Oldbuck; "don't suppose I think the worse of you for your profession. They are only prejudiced fools and coxcombs that do so. You remember what old Tully says in his oration, Pro Archia Poeta, concerning one of your confraternity, Quis nostrum tam anino agresti octoro fuit ut. I forget the Latin. The meaning is, which of us was so rude and barbarous as to remain unmoved at the death of the great Roscius, whose advanced age was so far from preparing us for his death, that we rather hoped one so graceful, so excellent in his art, ought to be exempted from the common lot of mortality. So the Prince of Orators spoke of the stage and its professor." The words of the old man fell upon Lovel's ears, but without conveying any precise idea to his mind, which was then occupied in thinking by what means the old beggar, who still continued to regard him with a countenance provokingly sly and intelligent, had contrived to thrust himself into any knowledge of his affairs. He put his hand in his pocket as the readiest mode of intimating his desire of secrecy, and securing the concurrence of the person whom he addressed; and while he bestowed on him an alms, the amount of which rather bore proportion to his fears than to his charity, looked at him with a marked expression, which the mendicant, a physiognomist by profession, seemed perfectly to understand. "Never mind me, sir, I am no tale pyet, but there are mair een in the warld than mine," answered he as he pocketed Lovel's bounty, but in a tone to be heard by him alone, and with an expression which amply filled up what was left unspoken. Then turning to Oldbuck, "I am awa to the manse, your honour. Has your honour ony word there or to Sir Arthur, for I'll come in by Knockwinnock Castle again e'en." Oldbuck started as from a dream, and in a hurried tone, where vexation strove with a wish to conceal it, paying at the same time a tribute to Edie's smooth, greasy, unlined hat, he said, go down to Monkbarns, let them give you some dinner; or stay, if you do go to the manse, or to Knockwinnock, you need say nothing about the foolish story of yours." "Who, I?" said the mendicant; "Lord bless your honour, naebody sall ken a word about it frae me, mair than if the bit bourock had been there since Noah's flood. But, Lord, they tell me your honour has gien Johnnie Howie acre for acre of the lay crofts for this hearthery knowe. Now, if he has really imposed the bourock on ye for an ancient wark, it's my real opinion the bargain will never haud good, if you will just bring down your heart to try it at the law, and say that he beguiled ye." "Provoking scoundrel!" muttered the indignant Antiquary between his teeth; "I'll have the hangman's lash and his back acquainted for this." And then, in a louder tone, "Never mind, Edie, it is all a mistake." "Troth, I am thinking sae," continued his tormentor, who seemed to have pleasure in rubbing the galled wound; "troth, I aye thought sae, and it's no sae lang since I said to Luckie Gemmers, Never think ye, Luckie, said I, that his honour Monkbarns would hae done sic a daft thing like this, as to gie grund weel worth 50 shillings an acre for a mailing that would be dear a pu'd Scots. Na, na, quoth I, depend upon the laird's being imposed upon wi' that wily doolittle deevil, Johnnie Howie. But Lord, haud a care o' us, sirs, how can that be, quo' she again, when the laird's sae book learned? There's no like the him in the country side, and Johnnie Howie has hardly sense enough to ca' the cows out o' his kail yard. Aweel, aweel, quoth I, but ye'll hear his circumvented him wi' some of his auld warld stories. For ye ken, laird, yon other time about the bodle, that ye thought was an auld coin." "Go to the devil," said Oldbuck; and then, in a more mild tone, as one that was conscious his reputation lay at the mercy of his antagonist, he added, "Away with you down to Monkbarns, and when I come back, I'll send ye a bottle of ale to the kitchen." "Heaven reward your honour!" This was uttered with the true mendicant whine, as, setting his pike staff before him, he began to move in the direction of Monkbarns. "But did your honour," turning around, "ever get back the siller ye gae to the travelling pack men for the bodle? Curse thee! go about thy business." "Aweel, aweel, sir. God bless your honour. I hope you'll ding Johnnie Howie yet, and that I'll live to see it." And so saying, the old beggar moved off, relieving Mr. Oldbuck of recollections which were anything rather than agreeable. "Who is this familiar old gentleman?" said Lovel, when the mendicant was out of hearing. "Oh, one of the plagues of the country. I have been always against poor's rates and a workhouse. I think I'll vote for them now, to have that scoundrel shut up. Oh, your old remembered guest of a beggar becomes as well acquainted with you as he is with his dish, as intimate as one of the beasts familiar to man which signify love, and with which his own trade is especially conversant. Who is he? Why, he has gone the vole, has been soldier, ballad singer, travelling tinker, and is now a beggar. He is spoiled by our foolish gentry, who laugh at his jokes, and rehearse Edie Ochiltree's good things as regularly as Joe Miller's. Why, he uses freedom, apparently, which is the soul of wit," answered Lovel. "Oh, ay, freedom enough," said the Antiquary. "He generally invents some damned improbable lie or another to provoke you, like that nonsense he talked just now. Not that I'll publish my tract, until I have examined the thing to the bottom." "In England," said Lovel, "such a mendicant would get a speedy check." "Yes, your churchwardens and dog whips would make slender allowance for his vein of humour. But here, curse him, he's a sort of privileged nuisance, one of the last specimens of the old fashioned Scottish mendicant, who kept his rounds within a particular space, and was the news carrier, the minstrel, and sometimes the historian of the district. That rascal, now, knows more old ballads and traditions than any other man in this and the four next parishes. And after all," continued he, softening as he went on describing Edie's good gifts, "the dog has some good humour. He has borne his hard fate with unbroken spirits, and it's cruel to deny him the comfort of a laugh at his betters. The pleasure of having quizzed me, as you gay folk would call it, will be meat and drink to him for a day or two. But I must go back and look after him, or he will spread his damned nonsensical story over half the country." So saying, our heroes parted, Mr. Oldbuck to return to his hospitium at Monkbarns, and Lovel to pursue his way to Fairport, where he arrived without farther adventure. Editor's note: C. Praetorium. It may be worth while to mention that the incident of the supposed Praetorium actually happened to an antiquary of great learning and acuteness, Sir John Clerk of Penincuik, one of the barons of the Scottish Court of Exchequer, and a parliamentary commissioner for arrangement of the union between England and Scotland. As many of his writings show, Sir John was much attached to the study of Scottish antiquities. He had a small property in Dumfriesshire, near the Roman station, on the hill called Burnswark. Here he received the distinguished English antiquarian, Roger Gale, and of course conducted him to see this remarkable spot, where the lords of the world have left such decisive marks of their martial labours. An aged shepherd, whom they had used as a guide, or who had approached them from curiosity, listened with mouth agape to the dissertations on fas and velum, ports dextra, sinistra, and decumana, which Sir John Clerk delivered ex cathedra, and his learned visitor listened with a deference to the dignity of a connoisseur on his own ground. But when the cicerone proceeded to point out a small hillock near the centre of the enclosure as the Praetorium, Corydon's patience could hold no longer, and, like Edie Ochiltree, he forgot all reverence, and broke in with nearly the same words, "Praetorium here, Praetorium there, I made the bourk myself with a flaxter spade." The effect of this undeniable evidence on the two-lettered sages may be left to the reader's imagination. The late excellent and venerable John Clerk of Eldon, the celebrated author of Naval Tactics, used to tell this story with glee, and being a younger son of Sir John's, was perhaps present on the occasion. End editor's note. End chapter fourth.